Live it up, live it up, live it up, live it up.
Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to the John Coaxum podcast, where I discuss actionable relationship counsel. Obviously, I'm John, and I'm so glad that you are here. And if you haven't already, you can follow me at all of on all platforms at John Coaxum LPC. The LPC stands for Licensed Professional Counselor on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere. And today's episode, I'm going to continue in our series on dating principles. Dating principles. Obviously, in a lot of my posts on Instagram and TikTok, I talk a lot about marriage. I talk a lot about committed relationships. But I think dating obviously falls into that because dater is obviously a feeder into marriage or to long term significant relationships. So I wanted to start off my podcast with this series about dating. And tonight, I'm going to talk about dating principle number two. Now, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. In today's episode, I'm gonna stir the pot just a little bit because we're diving into a topic I hear all the time from a lot of different people, and that topic is I'm just waiting on God. I'm just waiting on God. I don't know if you've heard that before, but before you hang up and before you turn off this episode, stay with me just for a minute because I actually want to tag this episode today, dating principle number two: don't spiritualize stagnation. Don't spiritualize stagnation. Now, before you give me the side eye or you turn off this episode, I want you to hear me out because today, I'm going to unpack what it really means to wait on God and why some of us might actually be hiding behind that phrase instead of actually stepping out on faith. All right. Now, here's how you can gauge whether you can stomach this episode today, whether this episode is for you, whether you're going to make it through it. All right. So here's the question. I want to ask you, can you at least allow for the fact, right? Can you allow for the fact that God may not deliver your spouse to your couch? Can you at least accept that God is not like DoorDash or Uber Eats? Can you accept the fact that there's possibility there that that's actually not how God works? And if you can accept that, then you can accept this episode today and what we're going to discuss. And think about it just for a minute before we even get into it. When we talk about we are waiting on God, sometimes we kind of maybe go a little too far with it or over spiritualize it. And think about like your body right now. If you wanted to lose weight or to get more fit, you wouldn't just sit there and just pray and say, God, make me fit, or God, chisel my body, or God, make sure I have these abs, or remove my gut. You would pray, but you would also get up and you'd probably go to the gym, right? You go to Planet Fitness or Lifetime or whatever, and you start to work on yourself because you recognize that that's what it takes to get your body in the shape that you want it in. Think about a job. If you want a job, right? You wouldn't just sit on the couch and pray and just be like, yo, I hope somebody comes knocking on my door with a six-figure job or allows me to get into the C-suite and become the CEO of a company. You probably wouldn't do that. More than likely, you would pray, but you would also get on Indeed or whatever, and you'd start to fill out applications because you know that's just how it works. I want to submit that same thing to you when we use this phrase, I'm just waiting on God. That in many ways we are over spiritualizing just an action or inaction of stagnation. All right. So let's get into it today. Here's what I think people really mean when they say I'm waiting on God. All right. So let's start with this. Let's start with the fact that I actually believe in divine timing. I'm a pastor, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian. I've read the Bible backwards and forwards, read many spiritual books, given many spiritual talks, preach, all that kind of stuff. I believe in the timing of God. The Bible is replete with all of that. I believe God has plans. I believe that God orders our steps. I believe in prayerful discernment. But let's be real, many of us sort of use the phrase waiting on God and we proceed to do nothing as if it was an ideal strategy for dating or finding our significant other. Now, I'm assuming if you are here, you've either have an interest or a passion in relationships, you know someone who does, or you're interested in getting married yourself. And if you have any inkling, if you're single right now, or even if you're dating, if you have any inkling about wanting to be married at some point in your life or being in a significant relationship, then this episode is certainly for you. Now, for some, it means that they've taken themselves completely off the dating field. So when people say, I'm waiting on God, they've taken themselves off the dating field. There's no more, dating apps. There's no conversations. There's no being open to new connections. They are literally just waiting, doing nothing, sitting down for all intents and purposes on the couch, doing nothing. And often what I find is that this waiting is often portrayed as being spiritual. But sometimes it's actually rooted in this very nasty four-letter word, right? That I call or that you know as fear, right? So sometimes we say that statement, but it's actually rooted in this nasty four-letter word called fear. Sometimes the just the phrase waiting on God is actually spiritual camouflage for a few things. All right. So let me break this down for you. It's spiritual camouflage first for the fear of rejection, right? There are many people out here who say, I'm waiting on God simply because they're just afraid, right? They're afraid of being rejected. They're afraid of going up to somebody. They're afraid of talking to them, putting themselves out there. They're afraid of risk. And if you remember in the last episode, that's one of the things I talked about when we talked about maximizing your singleness, right? If you want to maximize the time that you have while you're single, one of the things that you're going to have to learn to do, you're going to have to get comfortable with risk, or as reasonably comfortable as you possibly can, because that's what relationships are. At the end of the day, relationships are risk and it may actually not work out. So when people say, I'm just waiting on God, sometimes it's really just a mask or a spiritual camouflage for a fear of rejection. It's also camouflage for past disappointment, right? Because they have been hurt in the past. Somebody made their lives really uncomfortable. Somebody said something insulting or mean or nasty, or there was a really bad breakup because of it. And I completely understand that. And I'm totally sorry that that has happened to you. But many times when people say, I'm waiting on God, it's really just because they've been hurt in the past and now they're projecting that same hurt sort of into the future. I've also noticed that sometimes these individuals use that term because they may have low self worth or they may be battling it or dealing with it. And I'm completely sensitive to this, right? Because we all have our insecurities, we all have our self esteem issues or whatnot. But many people are saying this because it may confirm what they're thinking, that getting into a relationship or even pursuing one may actually confirm what they already think about themselves, right? So they already think low of themselves. They already think that nobody likes them or nobody will want to be with them. And so getting that out there and pursuing somebody, it may actually hurt more, because if somebody actually says the things that I'm thinking about myself out loud, it's going to hurt 10 times worse. Also, it's a fear of messing up, right? Or just making the wrong decision. And I guess the bottom line of this is that sometimes when we say we're waiting, we're really just avoiding. Yeah. Sometimes when we say we're waiting, we're actually really just avoiding the pain and the difficulty and the risk that it takes in order to pursue a relationship for ourselves. And the danger is, right, that we start to spiritualize our stagnation to the point where we actually justify doing nothing. We justify saying, yo, yes, I actually want to get married and I want to be in a long term committed relationship. But yet, somehow, through spirituality or overly spiritualizing things, we justify not going anywhere, not talking to anybody, not doing anything that would remotely approach the term dating. Now, to say all of this, I understand how you may feel, and I totally understand how scary it is out there for a lot of people. I completely do. I get it. I hear all the time, right? I'm on Instagram and TikTok and everywhere, YouTube, and a lot of people are just saying, man, the dating market is trash, right? It still remains to be proven what they really mean by that. But I hear a lot of people talking about it's trash. Guys aren't this, women aren't that, guys are this, women are this, whatever the situation is. So I get it. It's scary. And you actually may get your feelings hurt. But fear is one of the things that is going to keep you from your goal. If your goal is to be married and to be with somebody in a long term relationship, you cannot let fear stand in the way. All right. And so sometimes I hope that you will not allow yourself to over spiritualize stagnation. So first, that's what people mean when they say they are waiting on God in many ways, not all the times. And I'll make that clear in a minute. But sometimes they mean fear of rejection, past disappointment, low self worth, fear of messing up, all of these different types of things. I want to share with you, though, that faith and action, faith and action actually go together. Faith and action go together. Okay. I told you in my first episode, I would never turn this into just a Bible study, but the Bible is my worldview. It's my perspective, and it's what I get a lot of my wisdom from with regard to relationships. And even if you're not a believer, I believe it can be helpful to you too. But check out what James 2:17 says for all those believers. It says, faith without works is dead. It's kind of cliche because we use it all the time, but I think it's extremely appropriate here when it comes to dating. Faith without works is dead. Yeah, it is. You can believe all you want that God will send the right person to your doorstep or drop them in your lap, but check this out. If you're not positioning yourself to be found or positioning yourself to find, then how is that faith? Right? You're telling me that you believe that your person is out there and that that person is going to come, but you're not even positioning yourself to be found and you're not positioning yourself to find somebody, then how is that faith? All right, let's just run through a few things in the Bible real quick. God parted the Red Sea, but Moses still had to walk through it. David was anointed king, but he still had to show up on the battlefield and do all the things that a king should do. So, why do we think that love is just simply going to knock on our door while we're sitting on the couch and we're watching Netflix? Why do we think that? We don't do that with anything else. I told you before, we don't do this with the gym. We don't do this with jobs. We don't do this with health, with anything else. But somehow, some way, because we've convinced ourselves that relationships are just should be overly spiritualized, that we can sit down and a beautiful woman or a handsome man will just drop into our laps. All right. So if you believe that God has someone for you, I my counsel to you is show up like you actually believe it. Yeah, show up like you actually believe it. And here's what that means. All right. That may mean going out, saying yes to a coffee invite if that's your thing. That may mean dressing and preparing every day, like you could potentially meet your spouse. That means you're not even leaving the home without getting ready and dressed appropriately. We'll talk about that in a second. Maybe even, dare I say it, creating a profile on that dating app that you keep deleting. All right. So I just want to know, why do we feel like God is like DoorDash when it comes to relationships? If God has someone for you, then maybe we should show up like we actually believe that he has somebody for us in our life. Now, in another episode, I'll definitely talk about the one theory. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but there's a lot I want to say about that as well. But I want to talk about first this misunderstanding divine timing. Misunderstanding divine timing. So, another layer to this is just this sort of misunderstanding of divine timing that we have. Yes, are there seasons when it's time to date, When it's time for healing, for growth, for recalibrating, absolutely. There are definitely times when, yeah, you probably should be single, right? You probably should be spending time working on yourself. I spent an entire episode in the last episode talking about maximizing your singleness, working on yourself, investing in yourself, because how can we ask someone else to invest in us if we haven't invested in ourselves to begin with? So definitely, I even had a season like that. I had gotten out of a long-term relationship and I just kind of couldn't find my heading, didn't know where I was navigating. And so I needed to spend a little time sort of gathering myself, figuring out my identity, and then getting back out there into the dating market to figure out who I wanted to be with and who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. So I want to share with you tonight that you can't confuse stillness with stagnation, right? So you might be in a waiting season, but even being in a waiting season doesn't always mean that you just do nothing. Okay. So think of a farmer. I'm trying to help somebody, okay? Think of a farmer. Even in winter, there's planning, there's pruning, and there's preparation for the springtime, just like we talked about in the last episode, right? Getting yourself together, doing whatever you have to do to shift your mindset, investing in yourself. And my personal understanding and belief is that when it comes to relationship, waiting on God specifically, it should be an active process, and maybe in every process, right? Waiting on God should be an active process, right? While we're waiting, we should be praying. While we're waiting, is it possible for us to grow? Absolutely. While we're waiting, we can be in community or find a better community that pours into us. While we're waiting, we can practice vulnerability, right? While we're waiting, we can heal from past wounds, and we can even begin to open ourselves up to love when love makes itself available to us. So don't misunderstand divine timing. Yes, there are seasons and times where we need healing, we need growth, we need that recalibrating, we need to be by ourselves. But it doesn't always mean that waiting means that we absolutely do nothing. Okay. Hope y'all with me. All right. Also, wisdom is putting yourself in position. All right. Wisdom is putting yourself in position. So I think that you would agree, anybody who spent any length of time, reading the Bible, even if you've never read it, you just been to church and you heard a preacher preach about it, right? God often works through our movement, right? He does all the time. There's this one passage of scripture in Exodus where the people of God, they're walking out of Egypt. Moses is leading them. They turn around and see Pharaoh. And God is like, yo, why have you stopped? Why have you stopped? Tell my people to turn around and continue to walk to where I have told them to go. And as they moved, God opened up the Red Sea. The Bible is replete with these types of stories where God's miracles and his workings and good things happen to people who are actually moving. You don't have to force love, okay? But you do need to make room for it, okay? And I wonder, when we use the term, I'm just waiting on God, and we're sort of kind of like doing nothing, are we really making room for the relationship that maybe we think we deserve, or the relationship that we want? Now, here's where we get really, really practical here. And I told you that's one thing that's going to separate my podcast from others, is that I love being practical. It's like, why are we talking if you ain't going to give me some kind of counsel that's going to help me get to where I want to go? I love to connect the dots. So here is what that looks like, right? Putting yourself in position, waiting wisely. What does that look like? Here's what it looks like, okay? First, it might look like joining a small group or serving at a church, right? So if you're just in the house all the time and you're watching TV and you're playing video games, and I play video games and I watch TV, got a lot of shows that I'm binging right now and stuff like that. A lot of us do. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But maybe you need to get out. Maybe you need to go to a small group and get to know people and practice your communication skills, or serve at a church. But I also want to caution you with this one as well, because even as a pastor, and I'm willing to say this, maybe not spending all your time at the church. Okay. maybe not spending all your time at the church, especially if there are no suitable options for you there. Not saying you shouldn't serve your church. You absolutely should if you're a member there. That's what it means to be a member. Not saying you shouldn't give your time or your energy or what have you. But if there are no potential suitors or options there, then you need to place yourself in a position where you can make room for somebody to actually find you. Wisdom in putting yourself in position may also look like saying yes to healthy setups, right? Healthy setups, right? So if your friends have somebody who's like, hey, I think you might, work with this person, or I think you may be a good fit for this person, you guys should meet, going out for coffee or something like that may not necessarily be a bad thing. All right. And this is simply putting yourself in position. Nobody said you got to get married. You don't have to be exclusive right away. You don't have to do any of these things, but just getting yourself out there is half the battle. It may also mean creating an online dating profile with discernment and with boundaries. Okay. So I think I've heard a lot of people, in the church talk about we shouldn't you be using dating profiles and stuff like that. I mean, we're in 2025 now. Obviously, the most ideal thing is to be able to meet people in person, but we're sort of beyond that now. And it's okay to use a dating profile. As a matter of fact, there are many Christian profiles. There's profiles that are targeted towards your not only your demographic, but your denomination as well, and what your spiritual beliefs are. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? To create a dating profile where people can find you while using discernment and boundaries. Another thing you may want to do is to get a dating coach. I posted a video not long ago about learning more communication styles or something to that effect. And someone responded and said, yo, I got a dating coach, and now I have a boyfriend. Right. There was a lady the other day, I think she spent $10,000 on a dating coach because she wanted to be married, and she is now engaged. Right now, we can go ahead and project into the future and say, I don't know if that was worth it because it still may not work out. And you may be right, but for the time being, she is engaged. She has a fiance. And this is for both men and women. Maybe we need to invest in a dating coach or a therapist or someone to help us communicate better, or figure out why we're not communicating at all, or what the fear is behind stepping out there into the world. Also going to new events, right? Putting yourself in position may look like that. Going to events where new people are, right? Go downtown, go to, the block party, go to, the food truck festival, whatever it is. Get out, go places, see people, encounter people, engage with people, right? You can wait on God and still engage with other people all at the same time. I was listening to a friend of mine's podcast, and she made a really good point. She said that, one of the best places to actually see people is actually the gym, right? To go to the gym, because it's something that everybody, is there. You have both men and women, and you may strike up a casual conversation and meet somebody who could be your lifetime partner. You never know. All right. Wisdom in putting yourself in position could also look like presenting as a person that is looking for a relationship. You actually present as a person that is looking for the relationship. Sometimes we're out in the world and we don't even look like we're looking for a relationship. Sometimes we may look a little mean, right? We may look stuck up. We may look like we don't want anybody to talk to us. And then we're sort of angry and upset why people aren't talking to us. And this all goes back to sort of waiting on God, because we're just like, if nobody comes with a Bible in their hand and says this, that, and the third, or says these exact words, then they can't be for us. And no, no. All right. Now, I'm not talking about looking thirsty and looking needy or anything like that, but I am talking about presenting yourself in such a way that you're putting your best foot forward. You're presenting yourself in the best possible light because you actually want to be in a long term relationship. And then I would also say putting yourself in position actually looks like having honest conversations with mentors about your dating life, right? So this may be a little different than a dating coach, but maybe you have a spiritual leader that you're cool with. Maybe you have a father figure, a mother or mother figure, a older friend, somebody who is married already and can give you the ins and out, or who has dated excessively. Maybe they can give you some advice. All of this is a part of putting yourself in position, and sort of getting out of this mindset that waiting on God means I am literally just like sitting in a chair inside my house and waiting for my husband or my wife to drop through the sky. In other words, here it is. In other words, be visible, Be available, be wise, and work on yourself in the best way possible. And, put action behind your waiting. Okay. So let's talk examples for a minute. All right. Some people have waited on God for years and nothing happened. But the moment they decided to take one small step, joining a Bible study, like going to a friend's party, actually responding to that DM, they actually met somebody. And that wasn't coincidence. It was actually obedience that was with action, right? We all know a story like this. Somebody waited for years, they weren't talking to somebody, and then they finally decided to step out there on faith, right? To step out of the boat, and they met somebody that they wanted to spend the rest of their life with. We've also probably seen the opposite, right? People who said they were waiting, but really they were just scared. And that fear kept them lonely, kept them guarded, and even kept them unavailable. But I want you to understand tonight that God can use anything, right? So if you believe in God and you're saying that God wants me to wait, well, God can also use anything. God can use apps, God can use friends, God can use awkward conversations that you think may not turn out well at the grocery store, but you have to be willing to participate in the story that God is writing for your life. And the way you do that is not sitting in your house. It's getting out there and presenting yourself as a person who actually wants to be dated or to end up in a long-term relationship. All right. How do you know? How do you know if you're truly waiting or hiding? Okay? How do you know if you're truly waiting or if you're hiding? This is a good question, okay? How do you know? How do you know? Um how do you know if you're truly in a God-led waiting season or just hiding behind language and faith? Ask yourself these questions. Here's how you figure it out. Have I prayed about this and sensed a pause from God, or am I just afraid? Okay. This is where the hard work comes in, y'all. Okay. And I know some of you may not necessarily agree with this and may think this is too harsh or too challenging, but this is exactly what we need if actually you want to end up married and be with somebody. These are the hard questions that you're going to have to ask yourself if you want to be able to move forward. Am I doing the work to prepare for the kind of relationship that I desire? Am I doing that? Right? Or do I feel that I'm just this perfect specimen of an individual and this person is just supposed to drop into my life because I'm just completely perfect? All right. You got to ask yourself, am I open to how God might move outside of my comfort zone? Now, for me, I'm not going to lie to you, I literally met my wife in church. That does not happen all the time. Right? You're singing and they come walking down the aisle. You're preaching and they're there. Or you're sitting in a pew and they say, hey, you want to do Bible study together. That often, it doesn't happen all that time. And so, do you allow for the fact that God may move outside of your comfort zone, right? Outside of the church, outside of a Bible study. Maybe it's a random chance encounter at the mall. Maybe it's somebody sending you a message and saying, hey, I read the same book that you read. What did you get out of it? I don't know. I don't know. All of this should be done with wisdom, but are you at least open to the fact that God could be moving in different ways? Now, if someone showed godly interest in me today, this is a good question. If someone godly showed interest in me today, would I be ready or would I self sabotage? Right? These are hard questions, but they are absolutely necessary ones. And the main point of this is that, listen, I totally get it. When you say you're waiting on God, and when you're saying, "Hey, I don't, I just want what God has for me," you're not going to get any issue out of me whatsoever because I think every spiritual person actually wants that. But don't use spiritual camouflage, right, to cover up fear, right, or fear of rejection, or fear of messing up. Don't use it for that, but you can acknowledge the fact, yeah, I'm waiting on God, but in this season that I'm waiting, there is still some growing and there's still some action that I can take in my life. All right, let me give you some closing thoughts. Let me say this. You don't have to chase, y'all, okay? If you're a single person and you're looking for to date someone or ultimately be married, you don't have to chase, you don't have to strive, but you do have to be open. Yeah. You do have to be present. And you do have to be ready. Waiting on God does not mean standing still. It means walking in step with Him. And sometimes that means rest. Yes. Sometimes that means risk. But always it means faith and action. So show up, be intentional, trust God while also taking wise steps in your relationships and moving towards dating and hopefully ultimately marriage, which is my hope for you. Now, if this episode challenged you, I want you to share it with a friend who's waiting on God right now. And I'm not trying to beat up on anybody who uses that term, but I just want to make sure that we use it correctly. And if you have somebody like this, if it's not you, I want you to share it with them. And if you've got a story about how stepping out in faith sort of led to love or led you to meet your significant other, please DM me, drop a comment. I want to hear from you. Thanks for hanging out with me on the John Coaxum podcast. Until next time, I do want you to love wisely, walk boldly, and don't be afraid to take that first step. And please, 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 let's try to get away from spiritual camouflage and don't over spiritualize stagnation in our lives. I'm wishing you really, 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 really good stuff for your life and for your relationships. And if I can help in any way, please feel free to reach out. You know where I am. I'm at John Coaxum on all platforms. You can even go to my website, johncoaxum.com, for more. Other than that, I'm going to see you guys on the next episode. Peace.
Live it up, live it up, live it up.